Well, that's something then to take up with your regional leadership magistrate, because I'm it gets me I don't mean with you, but it gets me angry to hear that, because we are doing so much nationally to sell the magistracy as being flexible. Anyway, I know we're beetling off onto a direction.
Yes,
Luke will tell me off in a moment or two. But it's not good to hear that, because that's not the direction of travel. So you and your colleagues should discuss this with your regional lead. If you can't get anywhere with your bench chair, discuss it with your regional leadership magistrate, and even escalate it to me.
Right. I'm conscious of time,
Anyway,
Duncan. I am going to
shut me up
in now. And well, you said it, yeah. We're 37 past, so I think we'll make a start. I know you had your hand up, Karen, but maybe we can come to that at the Q&A at the end. Okay, great. We'll make a start, and thank you, Sandra, for putting the record button on, because there are a couple of people, as I said, who are on holiday, and hopefully they can watch this back on their return. So welcome everyone to the Family DCRM induction session. I'm very pleased to see you all today, and the first thing I should say is congratulations on your appointment as a DCRM. It's a very important role. We created this role in 2021. You are the third cohort of new DCRMs. We've had two before you, but this is the first family-focused DCRM cohort, and we're very proud of that, and we think it's a really, really important milestone in the development of the DCRMs because of the importance of the family court, and I don't need to tell you how important that is. So we're very, very keen to have you on board, and we welcome you with open arms. And really the purpose of tonight's session is to induct you in the new role, to explain what support is available to you, because you're not on your own with this role. We're not going to say goodbye to you and then never see you again. We're here to provide support on an ongoing basis and prepare you before you go out into the community. Some of you will have done this a lot already, even within the magistracy, because there are other opportunities to do this sort of work. And some of you may have never done this as a magistrate. But regardless of your experience, hopefully this induction session will help you to be ready to go out into the community. I'll start with introducing myself, and then I'll pass over to Duncan. And then I think it might be worth us just quickly going round introducing each of ourselves, and just to say how long you've been a magistrate and where do you sit, so what region do you cover. So I'm Luke. I live in Hertfordshire. I sit in London. I've been a DCRM since 2021, and last year I was appointed as the lead DCRM, and in that role I provide ongoing support to all of the DCRMs. I organise the quarterly network events. I'm probably one of the first people to get in touch with if you have a DCRM related query. And with that, I'll hand over to Duncan.
Thank you. Well, I've been a magistrate for 30 years, so there's hope for us all yet. But it's something that I've got into, and I've stuck with it. And then 6 years ago, nearly now, I was appointed as the first national leadership magistrate. I am very personally committed to this role of the DCRMs for reasons that I'll come on to later. But I sit in courts across North Yorkshire, so York and Scarborough and Harrogate. So that's my bailiwick. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just point out people to introduce themselves. We'll start with Karen. You're on mute.
I'm actually Karen Brown, and I am in South Northumbria, but we cover obviously Newcastle, Gateshead and Sunderland, and I've been sitting since November, so fairly new.
Great, thank you, Karen. William.
I'm Will, and I sit in Surrey and Sussex, so mainly Guildford, Brighton, Hastings, potentially Worthing, and I've been sitting as a family magistrate since 2021.
Thank you, Will. Trevor.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm a newbie, in as much as I've yet to be kind of sworn in from there. and I cover the West Midlands, including Coventry, Birmingham, who've just gone bust, Birmingham, and Nuneaton, and all the various areas. The positive side, though, is I am fairly used to public speaking and working with the public as a significant district councillor, and also working with a lot of diversity in my very, very long career with Jaguar Land Rover. So there's elements of it that are all new to me. There are elements of it that will be very frustrating to me, I'm sure, with the background that I come from. And really, that's about it. I'm kind of waiting to see what everything else goes on. I believe you'll know better than this. I'm a direct entry into the family court, mainly because rather than the general magistrate, I have a really strong background in deprived societies and various others. And the other thing that often shocks people is I actually come from Moss Side in Manchester. So I've seen many things in my life of which I wouldn't wish many of you to see. So that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you. I heard a bit of the accent there coming through. And interesting for you to point out that you're a direct entry. Yes, this role was open to magistrates who were direct entries, but also magistrates who sit in 2 jurisdictions. And you're both welcome. Yeah, we're very much looking forward to working with both people. Thank you very much. We'll move to Sonia.
Oh, good evening, everybody. I'm Sonia Wilkes. I'm a direct entry as well into family court. I sit in the Black Country, which covers mainly Wolverhampton and Walsall. There is Dudley, but that doesn't really do family. It's mainly criminal. Yeah, those are the areas that I sit, and that's how long I've been doing. And I'm still on the honeymoon period of being a magistrate. Really, really enjoying it.
Thank you, Sonia. Susie?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Susie Felstead, the Mad Cat Woman, as I'm often known. I've sat as a magistrate I'm in my 25th year, so I'm knocking on your door, Duncan. I sit Leicestershire, Rutland, Northamptonshire and Lincolnshire.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, we've got quite a few Midlands represented DCRMs on this call and generally, which is really, really good. It's a strong region. I'll come to Annie now. Annie, I know you joined a little bit late because you had another commitment. As you can probably tell, we're just doing quick introductions. So how long have you been a magistrate? Where do you sit and what region are you appointed to as a family DCRM? And welcome.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Yeah, sorry, I was a little bit late at work, just ran over, but I'm also quite a new magistrate. Well, it's nearly coming up to a year now, but it feels quite new still. I sit in Exeter and East Devon. I'm also a direct entry into family court. Great,
thank you. And last but certainly by no means least, Sandra is on the call. Sandra, well, actually, you introduce yourself, Sandra.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Sandra Benye. I'm not actually a magistrate. I am a diversity inclusion manager for the Judicial Office, leading on outreach and projects and initiatives. And I'm fairly new. I started in April.
Thank you, Sandra. And those of you who were here right at the beginning of the call, I mentioned Iram, who is a colleague of Sandra's in her team, who'll be joining soon. Sandra and Iram provide ongoing support to us in our roles as DCRMs. We couldn't do the work without them, so we very much appreciate their support. But Sandra's going to talk a bit more about the role of her team later on in the session. Great. So I'm going to move on to, I'm going to talk about the DCRM role itself and key relationships. So, as we said in the recruitment materials, the DCRM role is vital really to raising awareness of magistrates and the magistrates court system with the public. It's key to delivering the objectives of the Judicial Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, which Duncan's going to talk to. really DCRMs aim to raise awareness of the role and the system and encourage people to become magistrates. So it's useful to see the role as having two functions. One is about raising awareness of the role and magistrates court system, and the other is to encourage people to consider becoming magistrates. We've said since day one, since DCRMs were appointed in 2021, that really our expectation is the focus of this work should be on the form of the first point that I mentioned, raising awareness of the role. So educating the public on the role and work of magistrates. It's great as a bonus to be encouraging people to apply, and often DCRMs find that in their presentations where they're talking to the community about the role, that it has a secondary benefit of encouraging that audience to consider applying to be magistrates. It's important to think about that as not the primary objective of the DCRM. It's primarily to raise awareness of the role and educate the public. Not only about the role of magistrates, but how that fits in with the wider judiciary, the rule of law and the criminal justice system. That's an important point to make. And in that context, I'm going to come on to talk about how the DCRM role operates in the context of the advisory committee. And something that we've said again from day one is that you shouldn't see the DCRM role as a marketing arm of the advisory committee. That's not what we're here for. And advisory committees have their own resource. Some of you may even sit on an advisory committee. They have their own pool of people who might devise a plan to support a recruitment campaign that they're leading on in a particular area. And you are encouraged to support that campaign, and indeed you're encouraged to speak to the advisory committee on a frequent basis to make sure that you're not duplicating work that's going on in a particular area. But we've been clear with advisory committees that DCRMs are not the marketing arm of them. So hopefully that manages their expectations of you, and you don't get any unnecessary requests coming your way, and hopefully that's clear. Susie, I'll come to your question at the end. I'll just do my spiel, and then I'll take some questions at the end of my piece.
Thank you.
Again, in the recruitment materials, we identified priority areas of work for the DCRM. So we're not being completely prescriptive with this. At the end of the day, you should know your area better than anyone else. So you may want to flex these priority areas to reflect particular audiences that you want to reach out with your work. But nevertheless, in the recruitment materials, we were clear on what the priority areas were. And one of them was to engage in outreach work with educational establishments, businesses, community groups, faith groups, and the wider civil society. Now, obviously, within educational establishments, that's basically schools, colleges, universities, any other sort of higher education or further education establishment. We have recognised in the last couple of years that really we've identified that there's a gap in the market at the moment in terms of talking to adult audiences. A lot of good work goes on already talking to schools, and you may be aware of the Magistrates in the Community initiative, which is led by the MA. And a focus of that initiative, a large focus of it, is on schools engagement, which is very good, and it has a particular approach and a particular style to it to recognise that particular audience. And we think with DCRMs that there's an untapped market in talking to an older audience, and by that we mean really 16 plus, an adult type audience that nevertheless needs to know a bit more about the role of magistrates and the magistrates court system. So we think that really more of the focus should be on the adult audience, and you'll see that reflected in the presentation materials that we have on Magistrate Matters, which I'll talk about later. Now, none of this is to say you can't go and talk to schools, and you'll find that once you've been properly inducted as DCRMs, you'll start to receive requests from the Judicial Office to go and talk to schools, because often we get requests from schools, and I've done quite a few schools engagement, but that's the sort of reactive work. In terms of proactive planning of events, most DCRMs focus on adult audiences, and whether that's going out to employers or community groups, faith groups, those sorts of sixth forms, colleges, and reaching out to those adult audiences. So that's the first priority area. And then the second is to make links with individuals from groups who are underrepresented in the magistracy. I think, again, Duncan may touch on this in his talk about the judicial diversity and inclusion strategy, but there's a real focus within that strategy about trying to increase the representation within the magistracy from particular groups, whether that's an ethnic minority representation or a under the age of 40 representation, trying to increase the diversity and representation of magistrates, and indeed actually all parts of the judicial system, or parts of the judiciary. So DCRMs have a really important role to play in the outreach work that we lead on in tapping into those underrepresented communities. So you may want to think about what particular types of groups you target in achieving that objective. And then the third is to work with other members of the judiciary on joint outreach. You may be aware that diversity and community relations judges exist. They've existed for a long period of time than DCRMs, and the role, the DCRM role created in 2021 was sort of to mirror the DCRJ role that's existed for a longer period of time. And we definitely encourage DCRMs to work jointly with DCRJs where an opportunity arises to lead on joint community engagement events. And again, the Judicial Office will often get in touch and say that they need a magistrate, a tribunal member and a judge to go to X location to talk about the role of the judiciary, and that's a really great opportunity. You can even often get the opportunity to speak in a joint event with the Lord Chief Justice, who does his rounds at schools and colleges, and I did that about 6 months ago. I really enjoyed it. So those are three sort of priority areas. You will know that as a DCRM you're appointed for a 3-year term. And during those 3 years, you're expected to, as a minimum requirement, undertake 4 events per year. Works out at about 1 event per quarter. You can do more than that, but there is no expectation to do more than that because, again, we recognise that many of you have lots of other commitments, and we didn't want to set this up in a way that would disadvantage people who have other commitments, and we wanted to make this role as open to as many people as possible. In terms of reporting, DCRMs are required to report to me, the Judicial Diversity team, Sandra and her team, and Duncan on at least an annual basis, and that is through an annual return. So you essentially populate a document setting out what you've done in the last financial year, and that is the minimum requirement of you as a DCRM. But it's obvious to make the point that we want to hear from you in the interim. We don't want it to be an annual contact. We encourage you to keep in touch with us through attending the quarterly network events, which are put on at the same time of an evening every quarter, and they're an opportunity to network with other DCRMs, to be brought up to speed on any changes that have taken place, to the support for DCRMs, any new materials, etc. And also to keep in touch with your regional leadership magistrate. They're probably your key contact at a regional level. So I think all of the RLMs have got in touch with you now to welcome you to the fold. And some of them set up quarterly catch-up meetings, some of them set up more regular catch-up meetings with you. You're encouraged to keep in touch with them as well at a more frequent basis. And if you haven't been contacted by any of them yet, just get in touch with me and I'll prompt them. And as I've mentioned already, it's right to recognise that we don't operate in isolation. There are magistrates out there who are already doing similar work, very good work. Anyone who volunteers for the advisory committee might be involved in a recruitment related event. Any MA members who are part of their Magistrates in the Community initiative are also doing similar work, but probably with a slightly different audience. But nevertheless, there are other magistrates in your area that are doing work, and we encourage you as DCRMs to approach certainly MIC members and the advisory committees to introduce yourselves and to explain what you're planning to do over the next year, and to basically have a conversation about what priorities are going to be implemented over the next year to avoid duplication and to understand what's already going on in the region. The MA has made it clear that they are not allowing MIC members to conduct joint presentations with DCRMs, and they're not sharing materials with us, and that's a vice versa approach at the moment. But nevertheless, we're encouraging you to get in touch to avoid that duplication in the first place. I mean, I have to say, some of you may actually be MIC members and be involved in MIC. I know some who applied mentioned that in their applications. We have some MIC coordinators who are DCRMs. It is what it is. This is the protocol at the moment. If you encounter any issues, then get in touch with me and I can try and sort out any bottlenecks. But the main point is communicate with people who are already on the ground doing work so that you can complement and strengthen their work. Somebody's asked, what is MIC? MIC is Magistrates in the Community. That is the name of the community engagement initiative that the MA leads. And you can only do that if you're an MA member. Okay, so that's a high-level overview of the DCRM role and the key relationships. So just wanted to touch on that first. I think I'll now hand over to Duncan. I think originally you were meant to do your bit first, Duncan, but I've rejigged that a bit. Apologies, keeping you on your toes. Duncan's now going to talk a bit more about the judicial diversity and inclusion strategy, which really sets the context for all of the work that we're doing in the diversity and inclusion world, and is really the overarching document through which we should be delivering our work, because all of this work is about implementing that strategy. So I'll hand over to Duncan to talk about that, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's all right, Susie. I just want to make a bit of progress with the agenda.
It's just that my question relates exactly to what you've just been talking about.
Okay, go on then.
I am a Magistrates in the Community coordinator.
Yeah.
And have been for the last 9 years. Only we don't call ourselves MIC, we call ourselves MICE, because you would remember that at one stage there was Magistrates in the Community and there was community engagement, and the two were brought together, so we call ourselves MICE. In the last 9 years, I've done quite a lot of these various presentations. If I talk to you about the last 6 months, we do mock trials, we do talks, we arrange court visits, and have done, in the last 6 months, we've spoken to nearly 900 people over about 50, 60 events, which include educational establishments right the way up from 11-year-olds all the way through universities, etc., faith groups, community groups, and I would say we do 50-50 adult versus adolescents, I suppose. I am really struggling with seeing a difference between that, the MICE or the MIC involvement, when we do deliberately, I say we, you know, there's 3 of us who work very closely together. We do try to work very much with groups that should be spoken to or should be included because they are underrepresented. There are particular areas where people don't know what the magistracy does. Now, when you said that the MA is not sharing materials, etc., that puts me in a difficult position, because at the moment I've written 12 mock trials, which I share with the MA. So I'm really, really struggling, Luke, in what's the difference between what I've been doing for the last 12 years and certainly in the last, the last 6 months. I can show you my spreadsheets. It's identical to what you're asking for. And I'm having real problems with this. I mean, when there were some DCRMs appointed 2 years ago, probably the 21, the one that was appointed for adult in our particular area got in touch with me and said, can I piggyback your events? And I said, well, you're more than welcome to. I said, but you know, I can't see. She did. After a couple of events, and she said, well, it's pointless. We're just duplicating the same thing. So I'm really struggling with this. What's the difference to what's going on?
Okay, thanks for the question. I'm going to hand to Duncan first to talk at a higher level about how this all came about, because in fairness to me, the protocols and establishments with the MA emerged before I took on this role, and I'm working with the system that we have and the relationship that we have, and then I can talk a bit about, after Duncan, about how DCRMs do this in practice, because as I said, there is at least one other MIC coordinator who is a DCRM, and he's been doing it for 2 years and he's not encountered any issues. So I'll hand over to Duncan first.
Thank you. Susie, I will answer that question, but I'll do it in a roundabout way by explaining a little bit about the history of this first, I think. But I do have some views on what you have said, which I will share as the event goes on. So look, I'm not going to, at 6 o'clock on an evening, I'm not going to bore you with the strategy, okay? So I'm not going to plow through a strategy, but I think it's important that you do have some appreciation of the background to this. And it goes a little bit to what Susie was just talking about then. So back in November 2020, the Lord Chief Justice, for the first time, the judiciary published a judicial diversity and inclusion strategy. You may think it's not not a great stunning achievement, but actually it has been, because it had 2 main raison d'etres, if I can call it that. Firstly, it focused attention on what we call the inward-looking activities that go to support an inclusive and diverse judiciary, and make sure that members who join the judiciary do feel included and that their contributions are respected and they are supported. And the second arm of the strategy was what we call the outward looking, the outreach, where the Lord Chief Justice was very, very keen and is committed to making sure that the public understands the role of the judiciary. And the magistracy really comes up quite sharp in people's cognizance, yet they absolutely don't quite get it. And to prove that, we did some YouGov research. Well, we asked YouGov to do some research. 3,000 members of the public were questioned about what they knew about the magistracy, and a really good high percentage said yes, they thought they did know something about the magistracy, and they'd certainly heard about magistrates, and they thought they knew what they did. But when we actually started to drill down into, okay, so you've heard about a magistrate, what do you think they do? And there was a sort of multiple choice questions. Over 60% thought they were paid. A similar percentage thought that they were all budding barristers or solicitors. Many of them thought that only younger people joined the magistracy because it was part of their law degree. So the sort of misconceptions. And people thought you needed some kind of legal qualification in order to be a magistrate. So although they'd heard of the magistracy, the depth of their understanding about it was actually quite poor. So the strategy set up 2 distinct roles for the magistracy anyway. The first one was what we call inclusion and diversity magistrates. So the acronym is IDMs. And I'm mentioning this because there's still quite a bit of confusion amongst the magistracy about the difference between the IDM, so the Inclusion and Diversity Magistrate, and your role, which is the DCRM. And it's, you know, these are, I'm afraid that we live with acronyms and they're the bane of our lives, but it's very important that the magistracy, and more importantly, that you actually appreciate the difference. So the IDM role, of which there's 7 across England and Wales, focuses on supporting leadership magistrates in the inward-looking role. So making sure that leadership magistrates respond appropriately to the kinds of requests that Will was just mentioning, for example, in our sort of pre-event chat, that magistrates do feel valued and welcomed, that diversity and cultural beliefs are acknowledged, that people's disabilities and whatever issues they have are dealt with sensitively, meaningfully, and in a supportive way. So that's what the IDM role is. Now, you just need to know that that exists, because magistrates will confuse you with that role. But your role as the DCRM, that's the Diversity and Community Relations Magistrate, focuses on that part of the Judicial Diversity Inclusion Strategy that looks outward. It looks outward to our communities, to our public, to other judges and other members of the criminal justice and family justice and legal system. And as Luke says, the external focus is about attracting people's interest in the judiciary. It's about hopefully encouraging people from the widest and most diverse pool to become interested. And I'll come back to a second about that interest, but also, and as Lucas said, the main, if I was to put a percentage on it, I would say 80% of your time should be dedicated to busting the myths about the magistracy and about giving people information about it and educating the public about what your and our role is in the justice system. The 20% is, because we know this happens, you go to these groups or communities and the questions you're going to get asked are going to be, so how do I become a magistrate? If sort of anyone can do it, and that's what you're basically telling us, how can I become one? And therefore, and we will, at a future event, take you through the new recruitment process, because at the beginning of last year, we launched a brand new recruitment process. It's very different from some of the ones that some of you may have been appointed through, but it's all about encouraging a more diverse judiciary and magistracy. So at another event, we will take you through that, because it's important that you're able to answer people's questions about that accurately. Okay. There are 4 objectives in the strategy. As I say, 2 of them are inward looking, 2 of them are outward looking. And the strategy is a 5-year strategy. I think that's really all I'm going to say about it, because if you are really that interested in it, then you can read it yourself. It's actually, I think it reads very, very well. What you may be more interested in are the annual updates on how we are progressing against the strategy. And I, as National Leadership Magistrate, do contribute to that. So my response to the Judicial Diversity Inclusion Strategy, because the Lord Chief Justice wanted to know, Duncan, here's the strategy. I've sent it to all my judges. I've sent it to all my family judges, to all my criminal judges, to my civil judges, to my immigration and tribunal members, whoever. You know, over 20,000 members of the judiciary know about this strategy. But he wanted to know from me, so what's the magistrate's contribution to it going to be? And the first thing I did in relation to the inward-looking part of this was to recruit and train 7 very committed inclusion and diversity magistrates. Now, you don't need to know about those. That's not your role. But my other initiative was to recruit a cohort of DCRMs. And we did that because the only outreach activity going on at that time was very ably led by the Magistrates Association. So, Susie, I'm now coming to address some of your points. But they were the only show in town. And whilst in Rutland and Leicestershire and the areas where you serve, you've obviously got a very energetic MICE or MIC or MIC, that was not replicated across the country. In fact, some areas had no MIC or MIC or whatever. And the Magistrates Association, of course, ran their scheme as they wanted. And some of them did not necessarily align with the judicial diversity and inclusion strategy, because a lot of them were actually looking at educating people actually who at that time could not become magistrates. They were school children. And whilst that is very important, not diminishing it at all, our YouGov research and our wanting magistrates to come from more diverse communities, we needed to have a scheme that went beyond just schools. Now, you've said, of course, that in your area, you go across all communities and groups and age ranges and whatever. Well, again, you know, that shows that you've got a very energetic MIC, but again, that's not replicated across the whole of England and Wales. And we happen to know that the materials that some, not all, but some MIC members used were not actually approved by the MA. And again, some of the messages going out were not consistent. So this DCRM initiative, of course, it complements and really probably replicates in some places the MIC scheme, but this is a scheme run by the judiciary. So DCRMs are appointed by the Lord Chief Justice. Well, actually, and they're appointed through Lady Justice Simler on behalf of the Lord Chief Justice. So yours are judicial appointments. And it's very important to actually remember this, because when you go out there into the communities and start talking authoritatively about the magistracy and about the judiciary and about the courts, you are representing the judiciary. When those of you who do it under the MIC scheme, you're actually there representing the Magistrates Association. So again, a subtle difference there, because if you say something inappropriate, or can I say, you know, stupid even, or ill-considered, and there's a complaint about you, then that will be dealt with as a judicial conduct matter. And this is why we put a great deal of emphasis in supporting you, training you, helping you, the networks, everything else, because, you know, the public can be quite testing. They can you know, get to you a bit, and it's about having that judicial conduct always in your mind. So Susie, I don't know whether that answers your questions totally. Obviously, you know, you are running as an MIC coordinator, whatever, you're running a very, you know, energetic ship there. But as I say, it wasn't the case across the country, and the DCRM network that we are growing in numbers will be a national, countrywide one, and will not rely just on the members of the MA to do what all the DCRMs are doing. I'll stop there because I've overrun my time and Luke's glaring at me. And I know he's going to cover some of that himself, but I did see a couple of hands. So if anybody, Luke, do you want to take over the questioning? And I'll...
Yeah. Sonia, is your hand related to this point? You're on mute.
Apologies. Yeah, I think it is. And it's more relating to what Duncan was saying. So is there, and you may address this as we go along with the induction, is there like a, for want of a better word, a code of conduct type of document, a do's and don'ts that the DCRM will need to follow?
Yes, there is, and they're not. It's not meant to be a sort of, you know, a disciplinary booklet at all. But we're wanting to make sure that you don't fall into the bear traps. One of the obvious ones, which, you know, many magistrates can fall into with the best of intentions, but people will ask you, you know, so that case in relation to so-and-so, do you think it was right that the judge didn't send them to prison? You know, that's what the public are interested in, some of them. And so, you know, but the golden rule is you don't comment on individual cases. You see, so we do have this list of do's and don'ts. They're not there to make your life difficult. They're there to protect you from falling into these well-intentioned traps that, you know, because you never know, in that audience, there might be a member of the press. And before you know it, the next day in your local Gazette and Herald or Tribune Times, there's, you know, Sonia Wilkes says that the judge who dealt with that case was an idiot, you know, and therefore we come to you saying, Sonia, what were you saying? Yeah. So it's to stop you making those kind of errors, really.
Yes.
Thanks, Duncan.
And we do have the Judicial Office communications team, which we work with very closely when we're planning our DCRM events, particularly if they're going to be high profile events like with the Lord Chief Justice. And we have the head of comms speaking to our next DCRM network on how he can and his team can support us in our work. So yeah, picking up that last point about conduct is one example of how this role differs. But I wouldn't want to give the impression that this is a live issue, that we're dealing with conduct matters, you know, all the time. Since we've appointed the DCRMs in 2021, I don't think we've had a conduct issue. So, you know, this is just if we got to that point, but good to spell it out nonetheless. And Susie, I'll just quickly talk about one of our DCRMs who is an MIC coordinator. The way that he does it is that he makes it very clear when he's reaching out to a particular group. He makes it clear whether he's doing that in his capacity as a DCRM or in his capacity as an MIC coordinator. And it's just literally a change of the signature at the bottom. But he'll use the materials that have been approved by Judicial Office if he's running a DCRM event, and then he can do what he wants if it's an MIC related initiative. And that way he is still reaching out to people, but he's doing it with different hats on at different events. So I hope that all helps to explain and answer your question. I do want to just move on now, and if you've got any ongoing questions given your role as an MIC coordinator, we can pick it up offline. I'm just conscious of moving on with the agenda, but thanks for the question. Okay, so we're running a little bit behind, but I'm sure Sandra and Iram will do a sterling job of briefly summarising their role in all of this. I think, Sandra, you're going to lead on this. It would be nice, Iram, if you introduce yourself. I know you've joined now because you're a key person to speak to the DCRMs. Thank you.
Sure, that was perfect timing because there was the noise of the ice cream van outside, so we missed that bit. So yes, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Iram Syed, and I work on the diversity and inclusion team within judicial HR. And I'm primarily responsible for the admin. You would have seen my name inviting you all to this event, and I think I dealt with your EOIs as well and issued the letters. So if there is anything you know, you need to contact me about, or you're not sure about, you know, you have my email address, and if I can't answer it, I will refer it to Luke and possibly Duncan, but in the first instance I will try to assist. So that's all from me, and I'll hand you over to Sandra.
Thanks, everyone. Like I said before, I'm Sandra Bainey. I'm the Diversity and Inclusion Manager for the Judicial Office, leading specifically on outreach projects and initiatives. So I manage a team who all lead on projects and initiatives that aim to increase the diversity and inclusion of the judiciary. That includes projects to support lawyers from diverse backgrounds with their applications to be a judge, supporting people who aspire for a career in the judiciary with getting opportunities to shadow and mentor judges, doing outreach in schools to teach younger generations about the judiciary and careers in the judiciary with the aim of diversifying the future talent pool of lawyers and magistrates and subsequently judges, as well as working quite closely with the diversity and community relations judges to support them with their outreach work. I also have a colleague who leads on the D&I strategy and evaluation to monitor and measure the impact of these projects and evaluate where things are going well and where there's room for improvement. The main support that I and my team can provide you is advice and guidance regarding the outreach work you're carrying out. If you need more ideas on outreach support, or maybe you've got some ideas of your own about new ways to increase diversity or awareness of magistrates and need support or resources, that's the kind of thing my team can help with. Or if you need help, you know, reaching a specific demographic, feel free to reach out to me. I'm just going to ask you if you could put my email in the chat bar, and we're happy to help you. What would be really useful for me is if you have any specific problems or concerns to raise to me or to Luke so he can bring to my attention so that I'm aware of it. For example, as Luke mentioned before, I was talking to him a few months ago and he highlighted to me how our internet pages are very focused on school outreach, when obviously it'd be quite beneficial for it to also highlight that businesses and charities and so forth can also request outreach from DCRMs. So that update was made to the site. So things like that are really helpful to bring to the attention of myself and the team, so that we can ensure you have all the tools necessary to carry out your work without any obstacles. You'll have a unique perspective from being on the ground, so to speak, and it's invaluable information to share with me and my team so that we can be aware of it and support you the best we can. Just as a further update, we're working on developing a Microsoft Forms form for the annual returns, with the intention of this being completed by yourselves on a quarterly basis to kind of coincide with your quarterly network events. But in the meantime, please do continue to use the form attached in the induction pack. I don't know if we're doing questions now or if we're going to wait till the end for questions.
I think
I'm happy to take them now.
Thank you, Sandra. I think Will raised his hand. Do
Sorry,
you have a question for the team?
It's a very practical one. I do apologise. I'm not in the middle of nowhere. I'm in Surrey, but believe it or not, my broadband is so bad, and I think your colleague has typed your email address, but I can't see the chat box at all. So I was just wondering if you could maybe email out your email address. I know that sounds ridiculous.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry about that.
I'm going to send an email with
Okay,
everything.
cool.
You're going to get a huge email after this. I hope your inbox can
I just
cope
can't
with
see
it.
the chat for some reason.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
that's fine. That's fine. I'll send an email that has everything in it, including the team's email addresses. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sonia.
Yes, sorry. I think this may even be a question for you, Luke, as well as possibly Sandra, only because Sandra mentioned it. It's more to do with the events that we do, etc. Is there a system or a form, whatever, whereby we can get feedback or evaluate how effective the session has been, that we as DCRMs can actually learn from. So next time round, you know, we do it slightly different, etc. I'm assuming you're both nodding that there is.
Yes, there is a feedback form. It's something I'm going to mention at the end of this call. It's all of the documents are saved in one place to make it easy for you. But yes, there is a feedback form.
Thank you.
For exactly the reasons that you set out to evaluate events. Yeah. Okay, Susie.
Thank you, Luke. A very practical question again in relation to I am often going out to targeted groups. We're talking adults here, not schools. Going out to targeted groups, which sound to be exactly the kind of groups that you want targeting under this DCRM role. But often do it in tandem with the Lord Lieutenant or one of the High Sheriffs. Is there any problem with that?
Not at all.
She and I will often get together and decide, well, you know, this is a problem in this particular area. Let's go and spread the word.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. It's something I haven't mentioned in the key relationships. We actively encourage our DCRMs to build and maintain good working relationships with the High Sheriffs and Lord Lieutenants and Deputy Lord Lieutenants. So great of you to mention it. So yeah, absolutely encourage it. But of course, not everyone will know their High Sheriff or Lord Lieutenant, so we can pull something together to help introduce those of you who don't have those relationships in the first place.
The easiest way, Luke, is to get in touch with your local council and ask for the High Sheriff or the Lord Lieutenant's email address. Every council has one, and you just bang an email off, and
Very
that's
good.
how you introduce yourself.
Okay, well, that's another way to do it. Okay, thanks, Susie.
I was just going to thank you. Look, if you could send that, the reason I'm asking is I actually in Surrey have quite a strong relationship with our Lord Lieutenant, but I cover Surrey and Sussex, and I'm not in Sussex, so it'd be quite helpful if there was some way that I could introduce myself to the relevant people there, because
we'll come up with a list.
Sussex and Surrey are conjoined in terms of the magistracy. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do. Trevor.
Thank you, Luke. Within the kind of target groups that you're looking to get to, do you have a kind of shopping list of what they are, and is that broken down by area or generally just across the country?
I will touch on this in my reflections a little bit later in the agenda, so hold that thought.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions for Sandra's team? No. Okay. Well, hopefully you've heard a flavour of what Sandra and her team get up to outside supporting DCRMs. They do a lot of work for the rest of the judiciary, so we really appreciate your support, Sandra and Iram. And as you say, I'll share their email addresses if you need to get in touch with them for any reason. Okay, so the next item on the agenda was going to be some reflections from an existing DCRM who unfortunately is pulled out at the last minute. So you're going to have to bear with and listen to me a little bit longer because I'm the only existing DCRM that's on the call. And I'll just share a few of my own reflections, having been a DCRM for 2 years. On the basis that hopefully it helps you in preparing the ground as you start as DCRMs. So some of this I've touched on already, and I've just sort of bullet point listed it. The first reflection is that building relationships is really important to make impact as a DCRM. I've talked about some of those key contacts who are outside the magistracy, but it's also really important to build relationships with people inside the magistracy who are in a leadership position. And that includes obviously the advisory committee, your regional leadership magistrate, and also your bench chair or chairs, depending on the areas. Because although you're not reporting to the bench chairs, it's just polite to keep the bench chairs up to speed with what you're doing and to introduce yourself. There's a list of bench chairs online. Some of you will already have really good working relationships with those bench chairs, but I found, being a DCRM, that building and maintaining good working relationships with those magistrates who are often in leadership positions really helped me in my role as a DCRM. Whether that was helping to secure a court building that I was using for an event, or finding me the right person who could help me in a particular area with organising an event or something like that. So that was really important. The second reflection was developing a clear strategy or plan from the outset is really, really important. Otherwise, if you don't have a plan of who you're going to target or what you're going to do, it can feel quite overwhelming, because there are 101 groups out there that would benefit from your presentation, and you can't do it all. So having a clear focus from the outset, informed by evidence, whether that's data on who is a magistrate in your local area, or who is applying to be a magistrate in your local area, or who isn't applying to be a magistrate in your local area, all serves as really important evidence to help you in identifying who you might want to target. And I'm going to mention some of the work that we've done in the last year to develop that data to inform your work. Another reflection is that you should, it's a bit obvious this one, but make use of the resources that we have. We have developed in the last 2 years quite a plethora of resources, all aimed at helping you in your role as a DCRM, whether that's physical materials that we have secured from the Ministry of Justice, pull-up banners, posters, pens, that sort of thing, or virtual PowerPoint presentations, which we have stored online, and business cards that you can obtain to share with your networks. All these sorts of things are a real rich set of resources, suite of resources to help you in your role as a DCRM, and you really should make use of them, and regularly check in on Magistrate Matters to see what's there to support you. And then final reflection is to speak to people if you are encountering any issues or if you're not sure about anything. I'm an obvious point of contact. Networking with DCRMs in your region. There may be some who are in your region on this call, or when you go to the next DCRM network event, which is taking place next month, I think. You will certainly in the next few weeks. That's a great opportunity to meet and introduce yourself to other DCRMs and to check in with them if you are not sure about anything in particular, because there's nothing worse than going through with an event, something goes wrong, and you could have addressed it by speaking to someone and asking for their advice. And I mentioned the Judicial Office Comms team, the Judicial Office Diversity team who are here. They are also really, really important people to speak to if you've got any questions before you're planning an event. And then that sort of covers you before you do anything. So those are my reflections. No doubt you'll hear from other DCRMs at network events in the future who will offer their own reflections. I think you've all been invited to the WhatsApp group now. I've shared the link. Often DCRMs will post on there, and that's a great way to ask some questions in a more informal setting. Duncan.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, for those. I say I've never been a DCRM, so actually, it's what do I know about it? But what I do know is in respect of this new cohort of your good selves. This is our first foray into the family jurisdiction. Okay, so you are in a way some sort of trailblazers on this one, and it comes from a discussion that I had with the president of the family division nearly 12 months ago now, where he's very keen on making sure that the family court is opened up. You've heard a lot about, making the family court more open to public or media scrutiny. And so we anticipate that the interest in the family court nationally and publicly will grow, because even fewer members of the public actually had a grasp that lay magistrates deal with family cases. So and most often, it's always reported, the judge said this, the judge made this decision. And I know in the family court, you're all deemed as judges of the family court, but the public don't know that. They have you down as magistrates. And so again, lay people being involved in some of the most important and difficult decisions about, taking a child from its parents. In a way, it's probably worse than sending someone to prison. Again, you are going to be really trailblazing this idea about focusing purely on the family jurisdiction and engaging communities and the public in that, you can make these decisions as well, and you can be part of a family's life, really, which is very, very different from, the crime work. So this is a really interesting and sensitive area, and also an area where, with some of the recent, decisions. I mean, you've heard of the young boy in the Midlands who was murdered on Christmas Day. This is about 3 or 4 years ago now. And it was, a family court by magistrates that, sent that child back to his family. And again, no criticism of the magistrates at all. In fact, when this got to the High Court made it very clear, the magistrates made the right decision in the circumstances and with the knowledge that they had. But, the public knowing that and getting involved in it. So it's very important that we portray a very different image about the family court, which most of the public don't know about because they're closed courts, as opposed to magistrates operating in the criminal jurisdiction. And Luke's going to mention something about that in a moment or two, I think. But really, the president of the family division is very keen on what you're doing. And he keeps saying to me, how are we getting on in recruiting the family magistrates? What are they doing? And it may be that actually, when you've got a bit of experience under your belt in perhaps, 4 or 6 months' time, we will bring the president of the family division to one of these meetings, and you can speak to him and tell him of your experiences, what the public feel about this, what they know, what they don't know, because I'm sure he will be very interested as well. So I'm really, keen that that the family court and the family jurisdiction has much of a profile with this role as the criminal jurisdiction does. As I say, and you are the trailblazers, if I may call you that, because we haven't really got much experience yet as a collective, in terms of operating this on a purely family ticket. So anyway, I'll shut up. Yeah.
No, it's a really important point, Duncan, to make, and a good idea to have the president of the family division at a future DCRM event. I hope, Iram, you're noting that down, because it's a good idea, and we should have him along so we can have a two-way conversation as well. Opportunity for him to ask questions and vice versa. Will, you've got your hand up. You're on mute.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, apologies, sorry. I don't know if this is a question or a statement. I'm not sure what it is, to be brutally honest. But it kind of links what both of you said, because Luke mentioned the importance of your bench chairs, and Duncan talked about the importance of family, and this is the first family direct recruitment. And I know we're unusual because Sussex and Surrey are the only conjoined area. But potentially I have 8 chairs. I have 4 bench chairs and 4 family panel chairs. And what I think is something that should be on your radar is very much, because I know in one particular jurisdiction, the family panel chair does not agree with the bench chair in terms of diversity and promoting magistrates in. But the reality is the bench chair usurps the family chair. And I think it's just worth having at the back of your mind the fact that if this is going to be a family specific role, that maybe there is an educational role for some of the bench chairs to understand. I'm thinking in one case of a bench chair that has never sat in family and doesn't have a great view of family. There's a belief among some magistrates that I've encountered in my time that direct entry, there's a bit of a bias, and direct entry family magistrates are sort of second-class citizens, and they're not real magistrates because they've not done criminal. And I think that is a hurdle for the future in terms of diversity and inclusion. I know, speaking personally, one reason I was not a magistrate for a very long time was I had no desire and have no desire to sit in adult court. But I've encountered that bias quite a bit, and I've seen the division. So I can see what you're saying, Luke, about getting your bench chair on side, and I think that's very important. But some of the bench chairs do have an inbuilt bias against the family court, and that's a hurdle that probably needs some thinking about how you navigate diplomatically. So I don't know if that was a question or a statement. I don't know what it was.
Can I say,
sorry.
Will, I think that is a very perceptive statement. It's something that I am aware of. It's something that the president of the family division is aware of. And it comes back to this underlying ripple, perhaps more of a ripple in some other places, but this underlying ripple that the family jurisdiction is not as well understood or appreciated as the criminal jurisdiction is. And the whole idea about slowly putting the levers in place, and this is one of them, to have dedicated DCRMs, putting levers in place to begin to promote the family jurisdiction with equal passion and commitment as we do with the adult and crime jurisdiction. And yes, we do have some way to go yet in convincing bench chairs who predominantly do come from the sort of adult court that they've got to be more aware and pay more focus and attention to the family dedicated magistrates. And you know, if I ever heard anybody reflecting on the family magistrates being sort of, you know, second-class citizens, I would come in with the full force of a Yorkshireman, because you know, you take the same oath of office, the same recruitment exercise, the same amount, although the content is different, of training. You have the same declaration and undertaking. You know, you are judicial office holders, but you just happen to focus on one jurisdiction. And you know, it's the sort of governance arrangements surrounding the family jurisdiction do need an overhaul, and I'm the first to recognise that. But what we're doing here is one lever amongst others that Luke is involved with and the Magistrates Leadership Executive is involved in, to make sure that there is a sort of, to quote a horrible Latin phrase, and not everyone understands Latin nowadays, but I went to a Roman Catholic school, so it was always a problem, is that you know, primus inter pares, absolutely, you are first amongst equals, and I will always make sure that that is the case and that is promoted. But Will, a very perceptive observation. So we'll just treat it as an observation at the moment, but we know about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Duncan. Susie, if you don't mind, can we take your question after I've done my final piece, because I know some people need to leave bang on 7, and I do need to get through this. It's not a question,
Luke. It's just
could you put it in the chat then, because I do need to make progress with the agenda. Thanks. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to spend some time talking about some key bits of information that will hopefully assist you to do the DCRM role properly. So there's a plethora of information, guidance, support documents that are available online already, because we've been going 2 years. We've developed all of these documents, and they're all stored on Magistrate Matters. I will send the specific link in the email after this call, probably tomorrow, with a link to it, but it's essentially on the diversity and inclusion part of Magistrate Matters. And if you scroll right down to the bottom, you'll get to the folders for DCRMs. Everything is stored on there, including the things that I'm going to mention now, but I'm picking out specific things that I think are most useful to you. The first is expenses. It wouldn't be a magistrate call without talking about expenses first on the list. You'll be pleased to know that DCRMs are entitled to claim travel expenses and subsistence for any community engagement activity that you run. And they're claimable in line with the ordinary policy that applies for other judicial duties and sittings in the magistrate's expenses policy. What we've done in the last year is pulled together a DCRM expenses protocol, which essentially pulls together lots of different bits of information that are held in different places into one document that sets out in entirety what you can claim for and how you can claim it. That's stored on Magistrate Matters. I would review it before you make your first expenses claim. For any other additional cost that you want to incur, so this is the key point, before the event that you're planning, there is no provision within expenses to claim for it unless you have submitted a bid for funding to cover the additional costs. So whether it's an event, room hire, or hiring a stall, that sort of thing, that's an additional expense, an additional cost. There is a form that you need to fill in where you're essentially bidding for that funding, and you need to set out a very short business case justifying the cost. And then that's submitted to me. I send it to the MOJ, and then they'll let you know whether it's been approved. It's really important that you wait until you get a decision on that before you incur the cost, because I wouldn't want any of you to incur the cost and then get it rejected because you're not going to be able to claim it back on expenses. But we set up that fund in the last year to support magistrates, DCRMs who are incurring additional costs. So it's been very successful so far, and you can find all of that on MM as well. Now, you will all want to request physical materials to support you in your face-to-face events. There is a team within the Ministry of Justice that provides those materials, and what you need to do is complete a spreadsheet setting out which materials you would like. There's a series of tabs with different materials that you can pick from, and then submit that to the team, and then they will post that out to your nearest advisory committee building. It's probably going to be a court building, which is the HQ for your advisory committee, and then you can go and pick up the materials. And that's the process that we've developed with the Ministry of Justice. Again, I'll be sending that form to you shortly so that you can complete it and return it and get the physical materials that you need. The materials reflect the national recruitment campaign. So there's the "I can be a magistrate" slogan on some of them, and others have slightly different messages. But there's quite a range of materials, and our existing DCRMs have really benefited from them. We have a letter template to send to organisations. So particularly for you DCRMs new in the post, you'll be wanting to start to engage with various organisations, introduce yourself as a DCRM. So we've developed a template of a letter that you can send out via email or in the post, introducing yourself as a DCRM, and that sets out the spiel about what it is that you do, just to make it easier for you in your first few weeks. So that's in the folder. We have PowerPoint presentations. So we started off with a master version of a PowerPoint, which was dozens of slides, and is useful for some events, but not all. And in the last year, we've developed a series of other PowerPoint presentations which are tailored to different audiences. So, for example, we have a slide deck which has an interactive exercise that you can run with the audience. There is a slide deck that is focused on how magistrates juggle other responsibilities, such as caring and employment responsibilities. There are a couple of others, and the whole point is that you can pick and choose from those slideshows that are available online to suit the particular audience that you're speaking to. Now, I think the main slide deck reflects the role of family magistrates, but it's fair to say that the focus of them is more on the work of crime magistrates, which is a reflection of the fact that our DCRMs to date have been mainly crime DCRMs. Now, we recognise now that we have a cohort of family-focused DCRMs that we would like to develop our first set of family-focused slides, PowerPoint presentation slides. And I would like to create a working group of some of you, can't be all of you because too many people in the group, but a subset of you to join a working group to develop those PowerPoint presentation slides. And I'll put in a request in the email. Just respond to the email if you're interested in joining the working group, and we can come together in a fairly short space of time and develop some slides. They'll need to be approved by Judicial Office, as all of the presentations are, but hopefully we can get that through quite quickly. So very keen to do that, and I'll be sending out a request ASAP. A couple of people have asked about diversity statistics and how do we know which groups to target in a particular area. In the last year, I've been working with the National Digital Lead Magistrate, Simon Massarella, to pull out from the raw diversity data that we have for the country and for regions some pull-out documents that summarise the diversity position in a given area. And for reasons that I won't bore you with, we cannot upload each of those individual area diversity statistics on the intranet. What I can do is send them to you if you make a request. So if you email me and say you would like the stats for X area, I can pull that out and send it to you. So just get in touch if you would like them. And that tells you things like percentage of applicants who are from an ethnic minority background, percentage of sitting magistrates who are women, who are under 40, under 30, from an ethnic minority group. And we have actually had a set of new data in the last month, which gives us more information at a more granular level and provides us with data on other protected characteristics, including socioeconomic diversity, which is really, really useful. We're still in the process of reflecting that in the pullouts that we share with you, but you've certainly got the bulk of the data ready already. So just get in touch if you would like that sent to you. I've mentioned already we've got an event feedback form. So if you run an event, we encourage you to distribute a document to your audience to fill in, which can be sent via email, or you can print it off and circulate it in person. And we'd like to know the feedback from those events. And then the final thing, I mentioned this as well, is that every DCRM is entitled to their own business cards. And that's a great way of networking with organisations and stakeholders at any given event. There's a form to fill in to request those business cards, and you send that request direct to the team at HMCTS. Again, all of this is in the Magistrates Matters folder. So those are the main things that I could think of to draw your attention to. There will be some other things in that folder, but as I say, these were what I thought were the most important things to raise right now. Okay, that really is everything from me now. I'll open it up to question and answer. Duncan, is there anything you just wanted to mention before we do that?
Yeah, I really hope some of you will support Luke in developing the slide pack for the family. We on purposely have not done it because we wanted your buy-in to it. I mean, you're the people who at the end of the day are going to use it. And so, I mean, I've got no family experience, So you know, it's no good me putting a slide deck together on the family jurisdiction, and Luke hasn't either. But we know that you will have. So this is why you may think, you know, you get us in and we haven't got these resources. We on purposely left it for you to help us draw this together. So that's the reason why there. And I just want you to comment on Kieran's chat comment. So she said, do you think the target audience will therefore be different, e.g. student health, social topics? Very good question and very good observation, if I may say so, because again, you are the first cohort of this group, and I'm really going to be quite interested to learn from you where you end up speaking to about the family work. And I'm really quite interested in it because I don't see actually why it should really be any different from those DCRMs that talk to people about the crime. You know, I mean, up here in my own community, I recently went off and give a speech to the farmers, the young farmers group, you know, about being a magistrate. So I'm really interested to see how, what, if any, different audiences you either find or are invited to go and talk about solely the work of the family jurisdiction. And we will learn from your experiences, and we will develop that in the DCRM handbook as examples of where people can go if you wish to make approaches yourself. So I think my response to that is, it's a good point, it's a good question, and just be open-minded. You know, don't necessarily focus on those groups, you know, those professional groups that may have a sort of family interest, because they will know about the work of the family courts. Probably it's other communities who will not know about it that we want to try and reach. So I just leave you with that thought. But you know, Luke and I are really interested in how you're going to develop this particular role. So all eyes on you, guys and girls.
Thank you. Annie's got her hand up.
Hi, yeah, sorry, it's more of just a point really. What you were saying earlier, Duncan, about the kind of public perception, but I just was going to say, I don't know if anyone saw the BBC News article this morning that was about family courts, and I was thinking exactly the same when I was reading it. I was saying the judge said this and the judge said that, and I was thinking, I wonder if it was a judge. And also just noticing that I think media and what the public does get is normally very negative, and so I guess our role is kind of to show the reality and the positive side of it all as well. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting article. And
yeah, just to fill others in who perhaps haven't seen it, it came out this morning, BBC News, about some research has being done in relation to the evidence being around about domestic abuse and child abuse, and sending children back to parents where the evidence is pretty substantial that there's elements, I think it's called, and the PFD has tried to stop professionals using it, parental alienation. It's not a helpful term, but again, you know, Annie has picked up a good point where, you know, the public will have read all of this, and because of the Letby case and you know, other recently quite high profile cases involving children and the family court, you know, the public interest has been, you know, whetted on this. And it's these kind of questions that the public may want to ask. And they want to ask it because there's no other way of them getting to know. Because at the moment, the family court is quite a closed down jurisdiction. So it's just prompted me that, you know, Luke and I are very good at sort of sharing with DCRMs any stuff about, you know, I think recently we've found a very interesting article about presenting to people who are on the autistic spectrum. And you know, how to sort of moderate your tone, your speed of your voice, a whole range of stuff. And I think we need to probably make sure that stuff in the public eye about family courts gets to you as well, because you need to be forearmed in terms of, you know, how to deal with these if the press, or not the press, but if the public ask you. And perhaps we need to help you with some, or the judicial press office need to help you with some standard lines about how to respond to this, because that's the important thing, getting the response right. Because remember, we can't talk about individual cases, and we never criticize a member of the judiciary for making a decision that they made that the public want to criticize. So there's some definite no-go areas. But Annie, you're absolutely spot on about, you know, this whole interest in the family work has really grown in the last 6 to 8 months, definitely.
Yeah, totally reinforces the need to have you guys.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at 7:01. If some of you need to go at this point, that's absolutely fine. I think we'll carry on taking a couple more questions and then we'll draw it to a close. I think Trevor, you were next.
Thank you. Just a comment, really. I won't go into my long-term background and that from there, but it's very interesting, some of the things that have been said, and I've found them really encouraging in many respects. But the one thing that is common in all this is the issue regarding family courts particularly is absolutely one of perception. This is absolutely one of perception and the lack of understanding of the role that the family court can play. And in addition to that, is the long-term consequences of not getting it right within the family court, which ultimately will affect the overall legal system moving forward from there. And certainly from the kind of background that I come from, that is always the case. Now then, I'm still very much in the early stages, as you can imagine, of kind of understanding what it is. But coming from a kind of, if you like, a political and very much a local background as the chair of the licensing committee and things where big decisions are made, the key element is really building the perception up. One of the things I must admit I'm very disappointed to hear to some degree, although potentially not surprised, is the internal perception, if you like. And that in some ways gives you two challenges, because not also are you going to be facing an external perception of what the family court does, but in addition to that, the role of us within the kind of judiciary itself, and almost like raising the bar to get them on the same standard. That's really just my observation. But it's been very useful, by the way. I will say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you, Trevor. We do realise and recognise that you know, many magistrates. I mean, there's 13,000 magistrates, of which currently there's only 3,000 or so sit in the family jurisdiction. And so, you know, your work is not fully understood by even our colleagues. And that's not a criticism of them. I mean, they have applied for and trained to be, you know, crime or adult or youth magistrates. But we do need to increase the awareness of our colleagues about all three jurisdictions. And that's sort of on my radar. Yeah.
And you know, I think as Duncan said, you are the trailblazers for this work, and I think we need to make sure that as and when you start undertaking your community engagement events, that we make sure that the impact of those events is properly communicated across the magistracy, because we have our contacts within the judicial communications team, and we can make sure that the profile of those events is raised so that magistrates begin to see the impact of you and your colleagues as family DCRM. So we'll note that as well, and make sure that it has a high profile in the work that we advertise to the rest of the magistracy. Okay, I think we'll go to, well, yeah, Sonia next, and then Susie, final question.
Okay, just a quick one. This is more for you, actually, Luke. You mentioned about data. Coming from an educational background, then data is quite key to me. If we request any data information, do we have to be specific about what kind of data we want? The only reason I ask is that, that there are a number of people I know who have applied to be magistrates and have not been successful. And there is obviously an appeal system. Do we have data as to how many people, if they haven't been successful, appeal and what the reasons were? And the reason, again, why I ask is that one of them was convinced that the reason why they didn't get it was because it was racially biased. But so it's actually saying, do we have that information?
So data for the last year covers a bit more of a breakdown of the process. You've got data, diversity data for applicants versus recommendations, but it doesn't tell you anything more granular than that. I will definitely hand over to Duncan for this one, not least because he sits on an advisory committee.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do know about this. You're quite right that data in relation to advisory committees. I'm using the word advisory committees. You all know what an advisory committee is, I'm presuming, because you've come through the process. So I'll use that jargon. Last year, for the first time, the new recruitment regime has in place what's called an automatic tracking system, ATS. And so for the first time, we're going to be able to produce national statistics on not only who was appointed, but also who didn't get through and what socioeconomic, ethnic, whatever background those people were coming from. And we are looking for indicators that might suggest bias. Now, we've done an awful lot to try to remove potential bias from the system and this is why you do all need to know what the new recruitment regime comprises of, because it is a lot of the sort of sifting process has been removed. It's now undertaken by a situational judgment test, which we've had psychologists analyze the types of questions. I mean, it's cost over £1 million to set up this new recruitment system, so it's very comprehensive. I'm not going to go through it all now, but the data will be forthcoming. As I say, we've only just started it last year. People are still tracking through the system. So we haven't got at the moment data that is meaningful enough to draw an analysis from. But in due course of time, I'm hoping perhaps by the end of this year, we will start to get that kind of analysis coming off this automated tracking system. So the answer is we're still getting there with some of the statistics, but we will get more evidential basis for some of this in due course of time. Yeah,
that's lovely. Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Thank you.
And to answer your question, other part of your question, if you tell me the area, the geographic area where you want the data, I will send you everything that I have on it. That's the easiest way to do it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay. Final question from Susie.
Not a question, Luke. It's just an observation. I was saddened and dismayed to hear what William said about the perception of direct entrant family magistrates. That made me feel quite angry and very sad. I'm the family panel chair at the moment for Leicestershire and Rutland, but have until 3 years ago been a bench chair. Now, I was involved right from the very beginning with the recruitment of direct entrants, excuse me, to family. I think you are all as important, if not more important, than the old stagers who've been on family benches for a long, long while. You bring fresh perceptions, opinions, views. You bring a wealth of background knowledge with you, and you bring it directly in to the family courts. Don't let anybody put you down, because you're required and you're valuable. With regards,
Go on. Yeah,
with
go on,
regards to bench chairs and family chairs, knock on their doors. Knock on your family panel chair's door, knock on the door of the bench chairman. Make them listen to you. And just remember how important and how valuable you are.
Susie,
Excellent.
you don't need my approbation, but I'm totally with you on the on some, and it's not everybody, but some of the attitudes of, and I'll use your word, the old stagers. and yes, you know, the magistracy applauds itself for being diverse and coming from a cross selection of the community, and you know that does include you know, maintaining and retaining the old stagers, but you know, we really need to make sure that the attitudes and the behavior and the environment that we're asking new magistrates to come into is not a playground for the old stagers. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd echo that, and also I think it's good. It's great to see that there are quite a few of our DCRMs who are fairly new magistrates, full stop, because you're bringing a fresh perspective, and we need that in the magistracy as a whole.
It's an endorsement.
Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you. We'll draw it to a close there because I don't want to eat into any more of your evening. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you found this useful, and good luck in your role as a DCRM. I will be in touch via email probably tomorrow or maybe the day after, with all of the information that you need. I'm here at the end of a phone number if you want to get in touch. Email me, contact Duncan as well. But yes, good luck in your role, and we'll invite you to, if we haven't already, to the next DCRM network event. That'll be the next time we see you virtually on the screen, where you can meet all of the other DCRMs. But yeah, good luck.
And I will just say, you know, really, really, really thank you for your application for this role. Thank you for your interest in it, and thank you most sincerely for your commitment to this. You know, it just wouldn't happen without you. So well done. And it's just the importance of getting the message out there rests on your shoulders. So, you know, well done. And also the importance that we do attach to this is just evidenced in the likes of Luke, because he's been an absolutely fantastic DCRM, and I spotted him from a distance, and we recognise that as this cohort of DCRMs grew, it would need somebody with Luke's energy and commitment to sort of keep it all going. So he really is the sort of powerhouse behind the DCRM network. So use him, don't abuse him, please, but just use him. And I'm sure he'll be a great help to you. But thank you all very much.
Thank you, Duncan.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.